The rain had no manners. It came down hard and sideways, the kind of October rain that New York City reserved for days when people were already running late. Aria Wells was very much running late. She had her white cane sweeping ahead of her in short, practiced arcs, her leather satchel pressed tight against her ribs, her sheet music tucked inside a waterproof folder she'd had the good sense to buy 2 winters ago. She could hear the city in layers the way she always did, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, a pretzel cart vendor cursing at his umbrella, the percussion of 100 heels on the pavement, the distant horn of a cab 3 blocks south. She had a mental map of this stretch of midtown Manhattan drawn so sharp in her mind she could have walked it in her sleep. She'd been doing exactly that for 5 years, ever since she lost her sight at 19 in a car accident that took everything and left her only herself. She had rebuilt herself out of that nothing. She had made it into something. She was 3 minutes from the Hargrove building on 54th Street, where a 12-year-old named Joshua waited for his Tuesday afternoon piano lesson, when the world suddenly became a wall. She hit it at full stride. The impact knocked the breath clean out of her. She felt her satchel slip from her shoulder, heard the waterproof folder smack the wet sidewalk, and then she was pitching forward, except she didn't fall because 2 hands caught her by the arms. Large hands. Firm. Unhesitating. The sheet music spilled out across the pavement in a pale fan. "I'm so sorry," she started, already reaching down, already calculating the damage. No one around her said a word. She noticed it in the way she noticed everything, through absence. The ambient noise of the sidewalk had dropped out completely. The shuffling feet, the muttered conversations, the movement of bodies around her, it all simply stopped. She could feel it, the sudden stillness pressing against her skin like a change in air pressure. Something was wrong. Then she heard it, the slow, deliberate sound of someone kneeling in front of her. And then a voice, low and composed and carrying the particular quiet of a man who never needed to raise it. "You dropped these." He was placing the sheet music back into her folder. Page by page. Carefully. She could hear the paper lifting from the wet concrete, could feel the faint disturbance of air as he moved. She turned her face toward him. Her eyes, soft gray, still and unfocused, rested somewhere just past his shoulder. She didn't know that this made the men standing behind him reach for the inside of their jackets. She didn't know that those men had been reaching for something else, something far colder than sheet music, the moment she made contact. She didn't know that a single look from the man in front of her, one cold, flat, wordless look, had stopped them all where they stood. She didn't know any of that. She only knew the hands, the voice, the stillness. "Thank you," she said. "I wasn't watching where I was going." A beat of silence. And then, so quiet she almost missed it beneath the rain, "Neither was I." He was close. Close enough that she could catch the scent of him, dark cedar, something smoky underneath, and the clean sharpness of rain on expensive fabric. He finished gathering her music and pressed the folder back into her hands. His fingers brushed hers for a half-second. Then he leaned in, and he whispered 4 words into her ear. Just 4. Low and deliberate and meant for no one but her. She went very still. She didn't know why those 4 words landed the way they did, like something she'd been waiting to hear for a very long time without knowing it. She didn't know the man they came from. She didn't know his name or his face, or the fact that 30 feet away his second-in-command was holding a sealed envelope containing enough information to destabilize 2 federal investigations. She only knew what she felt. And what she felt, standing soaked on a midtown sidewalk with a stranger's warmth still near her cheek, was that she was completely, inexplicably safe. She squared her shoulders. She pulled her folder to her chest. "Thank you, sir," she said the way she'd been taught to say it, polite, clear, final. She clicked her cane forward and walked away. She didn't look back. She couldn't. But she felt his gaze on her like a hand on the back of her neck, steady and unhurried, all the way to the end of the block. Behind her, the sidewalk gradually came back to life. Pedestrians moved again. The pretzel cart vendor found his footing. A cab horn wailed 3 blocks south. The man rose slowly from his crouch. He was tall, tall enough that the 2 men flanking him had to angle their chins upward when they spoke to him. He wore a charcoal overcoat, no tie, and the kind of calm that other men spent their whole lives trying to manufacture. His name was Damien Voss. He was 34 years old. He had inherited the Voss crime syndicate at 26, rebuilt it from the inside out by 30, and turned it into the most quietly powerful criminal organization on the eastern seaboard. Police commissioners avoided his name in press conferences. District attorneys built entire careers around cases they never brought against him. The men standing behind him would, without question or hesitation, do anything he asked. He watched the blind woman until she turned the corner. Then he looked at his lieutenant, Marco, who was watching him the way you watched a man standing too close to the edge of something. Damien straightened his cuffs. "Find out who she is," he said. It was not a request. He picked up his phone from the pavement where it had fallen, slid it into his coat pocket and walked into the hotel. Marco stared at the empty corner where the woman had disappeared. Then he pulled out his own phone and made the call. The Bronx apartment was small and warm and smelled like coffee and old paper. Aria had learned not to apologize for it. It was hers. The neatly arranged bookshelves with their spines she read with her fingertips, the keyboard in the corner she played every night before bed, the window she kept open even in October because she liked the sounds the street made after midnight. She knew every inch of it by memory and movement, and she moved through it now with easy confidence, toweling her hair, trading her soaked coat for a hoodie. "You're quiet," Camille said from the kitchen. Camille Ortiz had been Aria's best friend since college and her roommate for 3 years. She had a loud laugh, a sharp eye, and an absolutely uncanny instinct for when something had happened. "I had a strange day," Aria said. "Define strange." Aria sat down on the couch, tucking her feet beneath her. She recounted it the way she processed most things, methodically from the outside in. The rain. The collision. The stillness that fell over the street like a curtain being drawn. The hands that caught her. The voice. By the time she finished, Camille had stopped stirring her coffee. "The whole sidewalk just stopped," she said. "Everyone went quiet. All at once." Aria turned her face toward the window. And his voice. "Camille, I've met a lot of people. I've never heard a voice like that in my life. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be." Camille set her mug down very carefully. "What did he look like? Or, what did he feel like? What did you pick up?" "Tall. So. The cologne was expensive, cedar, maybe sandalwood. The fabric when he brushed my arm was heavy. Cashmere maybe. And his hands?" She paused. "He was careful with me. Like I was something that could be damaged. Most people either ignore me or hover. He just helped. Efficiently. Like it was the most natural thing." Camille was very quiet for a moment. "What?" Aria said. "Nothing. Camille. It's probably nothing." "Say it." Camille exhaled slowly. "There's a man. He runs things in this city, the kind of things that don't make the front page but everybody whispers about them. You hear his name in certain circles and people change the subject. He lives downtown somewhere, has this whole operation, and apparently he's, well, the way people describe him is exactly." She stopped. "Aria, where on 54th did this happen?" "Outside the Meridian Hotel." The silence that followed had a different texture than the one on the sidewalk. This one had the weight of something serious pressing through it. "His name is Damien Voss," Camille said finally, very quietly as if the walls might hear. Aria let that sit for a moment. Then, "Well, he had nice hands." Camille made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a gasp. "Aria. I'm joking." She wasn't entirely joking. It was a collision on a sidewalk. "I'll never see him again." She paused and then added, without expression, "Obviously." Camille laughed, the real one this time, the loud one, and the apartment settled back into its familiar warmth. They talked about other things after that. The eviction notice that had come that morning, third one in 2 months, the landlord demanding the back rent Aria simply didn't have. The student who'd canceled on her this week, and the one before who'd moved away, and the slow, uncomfortable thinning of her client list. She had 6 students left. The math was getting harder to ignore. She went to bed that night with Camille's voice fading into the kitchen sounds, and she lay in the dark, her dark, the only one she'd ever known now, and tried not to think about 4 words she hadn't been able to identify. Across the city, 31 floors above Lower Manhattan, Damien Voss sat behind a desk that had belonged to his father and read a file that had taken his team 4 hours to compile. It was thorough. It always was. Aria Wells. 24, Bronx, New York. Piano teacher, independent. Lost her sight at 19 in a vehicular accident, drunk driver, other party deceased. No living relatives. No romantic partner. No criminal record. No financial holdings of note. No known associations with organized entities of any kind. He read it twice. Then he set it down. Marco stood across the desk with his arms folded, wearing the expression of a man with something to say and the self-preservation instincts not to say it yet. "She's clean," Damien said. "Completely," Marco confirmed. "Nobody. Absolutely nobody. A piano teacher from the Bronx. Who bumped into me outside the Meridian during a handoff. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. No, Marco agreed carefully, but in this case I think you might need to start. He shifted. She's not a threat. She's not a plant. She's just a woman who was walking too fast in the rain. Pause. Let it go. Damien said nothing. He looked at the file again. Then he looked at the sheet of music on the corner of his desk, a single page still faintly damp, that he had not returned with the others. Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. He had picked it up without thinking. Or maybe he had thought about it very deliberately and chosen not to examine why. He reached for his pen, wrote 2 lines on a notepad, tore the sheet off and handed it to Marco. That's her landlord's name and address, he said. Send a cashier's check. 6 months of rent. Anonymous. Marco looked at the note. He looked at Damien. He opened his mouth. Loose end management, Damien said before he could speak. She was involved in a situation she didn't understand. We ensure she has no reason to ask questions or seek out the moment again. Marco closed his mouth. He took the note. He did not believe the explanation for even 1 second, but he had worked for Damien Voss for 8 years and had learned very early on that some things were better left unremarked upon. He left. Damien looked at the Chopin. He did not throw it away. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe to Nikolai's Stories for more gripping romance and drama. New stories drop every day. Don't miss what happens next. Velvet and Ash was the kind of place that didn't advertise. You found it the way you found all the best things in Manhattan, through someone who whispered it to you, in a room where the lighting was already low. It occupied the ground floor of a narrow building on a Soho side street, behind a door that had no sign, only a brushed brass handle worn smooth from years of confident hands. Inside, the walls were exposed brick hung with vintage jazz prints. The lighting came from amber pendants and candlelight. The bar served drinks in heavy crystal, and the piano at the center of the room was a Baldwin Grand that had been tuned so precisely you could feel it in your sternum. Aria had been playing there for 3 weeks. She hadn't been looking for a performance gig when the owner, a retired session musician named Earl, called her. One of her former students had mentioned her name. Earl had asked her to come in, sit at the keys, play anything she liked. She played 20 minutes of Ravel and he offered her Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday nights before she'd finished the last bar. She played without sheet music. She never needed it. She had hundreds of pieces stored in her fingers the way other people stored phone numbers. She played and the room always shifted around her when she did. She couldn't see the shift but she could feel it. The conversation slowing, the glasses being set down rather than clinked, the particular quality of silence that meant people had stopped performing their evenings and were simply listening. Earl told her she was the best thing to happen to the room in 15 years. She had not told him she needed this job to survive. That felt like information she was not prepared to surrender. On her 3rd Saturday something changed. She felt it before she could name it. She was midway through a Debussy piece, her hands moving from memory, when the air in the room shifted in a way that had nothing to do with the music. A door opened somewhere behind her. The ambient sound of the room reorganized itself. The way a crowd subtly adjusts when someone significant enters, the way negative space reshuffles around a new object. She kept playing. She did not turn around. She felt him take a seat somewhere to her left, far back near the wall. She couldn't have explained how she knew it was the same man, only that she did. The room responded to him the same way the sidewalk had. Not in fear exactly. In awareness. The way animals orient toward something without knowing quite why. She played the rest of the set for 55 minutes. She played better than she had all week. When she finished, the room took 3 full seconds before it applauded. She had learned that 3 seconds was a good sign. It meant the audience had been genuinely somewhere else and needed a moment to come back. She stood, touched the piano once with the flat of her hand, a habit, a goodbye, and made her way to the bar where Earl always left a glass of water and a stool with her name on it, figuratively speaking. She had been sitting for perhaps a minute when she felt it again. That specific reorganization of air. Cedar and smoke and something that had no name, arriving at the stool beside her before the footsteps did. She turned her face toward him. You came back, she said. Pause. You recognized me. You have a particular presence. She reached for her water. Same cologne. Same way of taking up space without making noise about it. She took a sip. Most people who come in here shuffle. You don't shuffle. He sat down beside her. He was quiet for a moment in the way she was already learning meant he was thinking something through rather than searching for words. You played the Debussy differently in the second movement, he said. Slower. More weight on the left hand. She turned toward him more fully. You know Debussy. I know enough. Most people say it sounded nice. It did, he said. It also sounded like something else. Like you were saying something you didn't have words for. She had no response to that. It was the most accurate thing anyone had said about her playing in a very long time, and it came from a man whose name she still didn't know, and something about that combination made her chest feel oddly tight. Earl appeared and set 2 glasses of bourbon on the bar without being asked. Aria raised an eyebrow at the empty space where she sensed Earl had been. He didn't ask what I drink, she said. I may have been here before, the man said. You own this place? No. But you have influence over it. A small pause. I have influence over a number of things. She smiled at that, a real one, unhidden. That's either the most honest or the most arrogant sentence I've ever heard. Perhaps both. They talked. The bar settled into its late-night rhythm around them, quieter, slower, amber light deepening. He asked questions the way intelligent people asked questions, like he actually wanted the answers. She told him about teaching piano to children in apartments across the Bronx, about the particular joy of the moment when a child stopped thinking about the notes and started feeling them. He told her nothing about himself in so many words, but she built a picture from other things. The way he considered his words, the absence of small talk, the fact that he listened as if it were a skill he had spent years developing. At some point she made a joke about a student who had once played an entire recital piece in the wrong key because he'd been too nervous to admit he'd forgotten it. He laughed. It was a quiet sound but completely unguarded, the laugh of someone who had forgotten for a moment that they were the kind of man who didn't do that in public. She heard it land, heard the brief silence afterward that said he'd surprised himself. She filed it away in the part of her that understood people. An hour and a half after he'd sat down, he stood up. I should go, he said. You never told me your name. Pause. No, he agreed. I didn't ask. I noticed. She turned back to the bar. She heard him set something down, the clink of glass, and then something smaller, softer. Paper, maybe. Good night, he said. Good night, she answered. She heard him leave. She heard the door settle behind him. She heard the room exhale. Then she reached out and touched the bar where he'd been sitting. Under her fingers she found a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly. She couldn't read it. She had no way of knowing that it was a phone number written in clean, spare handwriting with no name beside it. She put it in her pocket anyway. She was still smiling when Earl came to close down the bar. It started with footsteps. Aria had spent 5 years developing the kind of spatial awareness that most sighted people never needed. A near-architectural understanding of the sounds around her, what they meant, where they came from, whether they matched. She knew the sound of her block in the Bronx. The Reyes family's dog barking at the mail truck every morning, the specific rhythm of the crosswalk signal on the corner, the way the bodega door scraped its frame when Mr. Patel opened up at 6. She knew what her block sounded like. So she knew, on Wednesday evening when she walked home from her last lesson on Morris Avenue, that the footsteps 40 feet behind her were wrong. They were too consistent. Most pedestrians varied their pace, sped up at corners, paused at phones. These footsteps kept exact time with hers, matching her stride for stride in a way that was either a remarkable coincidence or a deliberate choice. She stopped twice. They stopped twice, half a second later, just late enough to seem accidental. She noted it. She did not panic. Panic was not useful. She went home, locked the door, and sat in the kitchen while Camille made pasta and talked about her day. Aria listened and said the right things and thought about footsteps the whole time. Thursday evening, a car idled outside her building for 40 minutes. She heard the engine from the window, a heavy idle, low and diesel dark, not a livery cab, not a delivery van. Just waiting. She timed it. 43 minutes. Friday, she called the non-emergency police line. The officer who answered was polite and efficient and completely, thoroughly dismissive. She could hear it in the careful pause before each of his sentences. The slight recalibration that happened when people realized they were talking to her, the gentle over-articulation that meant they had already decided she was confused. He told her to call back if she felt threatened. She hung up feeling the specific exhaustion of being a woman alone in a city that had just told her, very kindly, that it did not believe her. She went to Velvet and Ash that night and played like she was angry, which meant she played beautifully. She did not know that 2 hours earlier, in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, 3 of Damien's men had followed a thread from an intercepted communication and found 2 Ruiz cartel scouts sitting in a car with a photograph of Aria Wells, a copy of her teaching schedule, and a direct order from Alejandro Ruiz to bring her in quietly. She did not know about Alejandro Ruiz. She did not know that Alejandro Ruiz had been watching Damien Voss for 6 months, looking for a pressure point, a weakness, something human that could be used. She did not know that Damien's presence at Velvet and Ash had been clocked by Ruiz's people, or that a blind piano teacher from the Bronx had, through no fault of her own, become the most valuable piece on a board she didn't know she was sitting on. She did not know any of this. Damien did. Marco delivered the report by phone. Damien listened without speaking. When Marco finished, there was a silence that the men who worked for Damien Voss had learned to recognize as more dangerous than shouting. The two scouts, Damien said finally, being held at Red Hook. The order from Ruiz, how far down the chain? Came from him directly. He wants her to send a message. Something that lands personally. Another silence. Shorter this time. Get the car, Damien said. And call ahead to Velvet and Ash. Tell Earl to keep her after the set. She doesn't know you. She doesn't know any of this. She's not going to. Get the car, Marco. Aria was at the bar after her set, still coming down from the music, when she felt the air change for the second time that week. But this time it was different. This time there was urgency underneath it. He was at the bar in 3 strides. She heard him. The pace was faster than before, the footfall carrying something that wasn't quite tension but was adjacent to it, a coiled spring quality she hadn't felt from him in the piano bar light and the slow bourbon hours. He took her hand. Carefully, not grabbing, just taking with the same deliberateness he seemed to apply to everything. She felt her whole nervous system register it. You need to come with me, he said. Come. Quiet. That voice. She pulled her hand back. Not sharply but back. I don't know you, she said. I don't know your name. I don't know anything about you except that you know Debussy and you tip well. She turned on the stool to face the direction of his voice, chin level, spine straight. I've been independent for 5 years. I don't go anywhere with anyone I don't know. She meant it. Every word. She had rebuilt herself out of nothing, and part of that rebuilding was this. The promise she had made to herself at 19 that she would never again be someone who needed rescuing, who followed without understanding, who trusted because it was easier than asking. She waited. He was quiet for a moment. She heard his breath, slow, deliberate, the breath of a man making a decision. Then he leaned close. Close enough that the cedar smoke of him surrounded her again, close enough that his voice was a warmth near her ear, and he spoke the same 4 words he had whispered to her on a rain-soaked sidewalk on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. The words she hadn't been able to name. The words that had landed like something she'd waited for. Her breath stopped. Her hands, resting on the bar, went still. She thought about footsteps that matched hers on Morris Avenue. She thought about a diesel engine idling for 43 minutes. She thought about a police officer who had not believed her. She thought about these 4 words and who said them and how. She reached out and found the bar stool. She stood up. All right, she said quietly. She took his arm. They left. Nicoai's Stories brings you unforgettable tales of love in the most dangerous places. Share this story with someone who loves a good story, and subscribe so you never miss a story. The penthouse was enormous and utterly quiet. Aria knew it was enormous because of the way sound moved inside it. High ceilings, the whispered echo of her footsteps on hardwood, the distant hum of the city coming from multiple directions at once, which meant windows on every side. She knew it was expensive the way she always knew these things, through texture and temperature and the quality of the air itself, which was warm and filtered and carried the scent of leather and cedar and something cold and clean, like a window left open onto height. She stood in the center of what she calculated was the main room and listened. Sit wherever you're comfortable, his voice said from somewhere to her right. There's a couch 2 steps in front of you to your left. She found it with her cane. She sat. She kept her back straight. She heard him move through the space, unhurried, the sounds of a man in a place that was fully and completely his. Ice settling into glass. Water running briefly. A door opening and closing somewhere down a hall. Then he was back and he set something on the low table in front of her. Water, he said. Unless you'd prefer something else. Water is fine. She reached forward and found the glass. She drank. She set it down. The city hummed 60 floors below. Are you going to tell me now, she said, what's happening? He sat. She felt the weight of his presence settle somewhere across from her. Not close, not at a safe social distance either. Somewhere in between where honest conversations happened. He told her. He told her about the Ruiz cartel. About what his men had found in Red Hook. About the photograph and the schedule and what would have happened to her if his people hadn't been watching. He told it plainly, without drama, the way someone delivered difficult information when they respected the person receiving it. When he finished, she sat with it. So I'm in danger, she said, because someone is trying to use me against you. Yes. Because you were seen with me at the bar. Pause. Yes. Because you kept coming back. The pause this time was longer. Yes. She turned her face toward his voice. Outside, the first gray light of pre-dawn was beginning to press against the glass. She could feel the room shifting, the darkness thinning. In an hour it would be morning. You came back 3 times before tonight, she said. Earl didn't call ahead the first 2 times. No. So you weren't there on business. The word business she gave a slight, precise weight. Not mocking. Just accurate. He didn't answer that. But he didn't redirect either, and she had learned that his silences were their own kind of answer. She folded her hands in her lap. What did you whisper to me? She asked. On the sidewalk. And tonight. Pause. You said it twice, but I could never identify the words. I heard them. I felt them. But I couldn't. She stopped. Started again. What did you say to me? The room breathed around them. He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then she heard him lean forward, the soft sound of movement, the slight shift in the air between them. I said, he told her, low and unhurried, I won't let anyone hurt you. The city hummed. Aria sat very still. On the sidewalk, she said carefully, you said that to a stranger. Someone you'd never met. Someone you didn't know at all. Yes. Why? Another silence. This one felt different, not guarded but open, the way silences felt when the person in them was finding something true rather than something safe. Because, he said, the moment you looked up at me, your eyes open, not knowing my face, not knowing who I was or what surrounded you, you weren't afraid. Pause. My own men are afraid of me, Aria. People who've known me for years rearrange themselves when I walk into a room. But you stood on that sidewalk and you said thank you, sir, and walked away. His voice was very quiet. You were the bravest person on that street. She said nothing for a long moment. She was thinking about being 19 and waking up in a hospital room to a darkness that would never lift and deciding, not immediately, not easily, but deciding eventually, that she would not be diminished by it. She was thinking about 5 years of navigating a city that was not built for her, of teaching children to love music, of playing piano in a bar where nobody knew her name and the music said everything she couldn't. She was thinking about a man who ran an empire and had held her sheet music like it was something precious. You didn't say it to protect me, she said. Not the first time. You said it because you meant it. He didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. And tonight, she said. You said it again. Tonight I meant it more. She breathed out slowly. Outside, the sky was lightening for real now, the darkness breaking into the pale gray that came before color, before the city fully woke. Somewhere below, she imagined, his men were finishing whatever needed finishing. She didn't ask about that. She filed it into the category of things she could examine later. His phone buzzed. What? He looked at it, she heard the brief sound of him moving, and then he set it face down. It's handled, he said. The Ruiz people. Yes. She nodded. She pressed her palms flat on her knees, once, a steadying gesture she used when she needed to think clearly. Then she said, what happens now? You give me money and relocate me somewhere. Change my name. Disappear me into something safe. That's one option, he said carefully. You have security resources. Favors in high places. You could erase this whole situation and I could go back to teaching piano in the Bronx and we both pretend this was just... She stopped. Just what? He said. She turned her face toward him in the growing light. Or, she said, you could stop pretending this isn't something. The room was very quiet. She was aware of how still he had gone, the full, absolute stillness of a man who was never caught off guard and had just been caught completely off guard. She could feel it across the space between them, could feel the shift in him the way she felt everything, through the small invisible currents that moved between people when something real was happening. Damien Voss, who had made decisions in seconds that other men took weeks to make, who had never once hesitated in any room he'd ever entered, sat across from a blind piano teacher in a penthouse above a waking city and did not speak. 1 second. 2. 3. She heard him move. Not away, forward. She felt the couch shift slightly as his weight redistributed, felt the air between them change, felt his hand come to rest over hers on her knee, warm, deliberate, sure. He held it. She didn't pull away. Below them, Manhattan was opening its eyes. The cabs were beginning their morning runs. The bodega owners were unlocking their doors. Somewhere in the Bronx, a boy named Joshua was probably sleeping late on a Saturday morning, his piano lesson 3 days away. The city was alive, enormous, indifferent. Up here, 2 people sat in the first light and held on. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. But somewhere across the city, in an office with blackout curtains and a view of the bridge, a phone lit up on a desk. A man looked at the screen. He read 4 words. She's with him now. He set the phone down. He laced his fingers together. He smiled the way people smiled when a plan was only just beginning. The city hummed. The story wasn't over. It was only the end of the beginning. You made it to the end, and what an ending. Nikolai Stories is where love finds you in the most unexpected places. Subscribe, like, and share to support the channel, and stay close because the next story is already coming.